going to go ahead and call this meeting to order and declare a quorum of 7 members present and move on to item C, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the accelerated instruction for 2015-16. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Dr. Yokin. We have tonight a public hearing for our accelerated instruction for this previous school year. This is by statute. We must report on the offerings that we give for students who have failed one or more sections of the versions of the end-of-course exam. And so with the report tonight is Molly Perry, Executive Director for Special Services and Accountability. Mrs. Perry.
Thank you, Dr. Ely, Dr. Yokin, members of the board. I am glad to bring you this public hearing report tonight on accelerated instruction. There's lots of L's and R's in there. As Dr. Ely mentioned, this is all about that required instruction following a student not meeting the standard on one of the high school end-of-course exams. This was part of that very large House Bill 5 back in the 83rd legislative session. And so we were going to talk tonight, as we have for the last few years at this time, about the kinds of instruction that we're providing and what those results look like. So first of all, just as a quick reminder for those of you that have not had or currently have high school students, there are 5 required end-of-course exams for graduation. And those are listed, including Algebra 1, Biology, English 1 and 2, as well as U.S. History. So you can see very front-heavy in high school. Most of those are completed during a student's freshman and sophomore year, and sometimes even earlier than that if students are taking Algebra 1 prior to high school enrollment. And so as a reminder, we did say that these are required for graduation, and they are. There is also a caveat to Senate Bill 149 that's been in the place for the last several years and is extended through this particular school year. For students who have failed no more than 2 end-of-course exams, there is an alternate pathway to graduation. We all know that there are certain students that have high levels of test anxiety or for whatever reason are able to pass their courses but can't quite meet the criterion on those tests. And those students do have an alternate pathway through an individual graduation committee where they meet with a number of required members, including the content area teacher, campus administration, and they develop a plan for how they're going to show proficiency in an alternate way. And if they are able to complete that and that committee agrees and approves, then that student can move forward with their graduation. This will be up for debate during the next legislative session. We've seen a lot of success here, even in College Station ISD, for some students who really do need an alternative pathway. And so we're hopeful that we will see some continuation of this, especially for those students that are looking to move on to careers in the military. So we primarily think of accelerated instruction related to EOC as summer remediation. That's not all it is, but this is the bulk of it. Because our testing has occurred, our retesting has occurred at the beginning of July for the last several years. Most of that retesting happens over a 2-week period or 8 days in June. So we get those results at the very beginning of June or even sometimes late May. We quickly determine who all needs to participate, notify families, notify students, and get our section set and go. Now this year we did it a little bit differently. Rather than on each individual campus, we combined those programs and held them all at Consol. And this reason was twofold. One, we were really trying to see would this sort of risk-taking opportunity of doing things a different way increase our participation, because our regular summer school or credit recovery also was happening there at AMCHS. And our thinking was that perhaps there would be students that needed both, and we could offer one-stop shopping for both credit recovery and of course remediation. And so we really wanted to just try something a little differently this year. Unfortunately, results were mixed in terms of whether or not we really saw a greater level of student participation. However, what we really found is that the students who need remediation for end-of-course exams are not the students that need credit recovery. So there's not always that clear link like you might think about a student passing a course versus needing to retake that exam. So these are our total number of students across the different content areas that did participate in that summer program specifically, where they came to Consol. Those numbers, of course, right now are a little bit out of context. We're going to look at the actual numbers of students requiring those remediations in just a moment. But you can see right away that English 1 and 2 were definitely by far the majority, and that's because that's where most of the students that do need to retake an assessment fall. Those remediations were done concurrently because the majority of the content is very, very similar. There was just some nuances that were handled through individualized flexible groupings. In fact, the whole summer remediation program was really designed in that way, that when students came, they really looked and analyzed their performance on the different domains within the assessment and formed groups based on need. And so it was really a very different way of looking at things. And so unfortunately, we didn't have the participation we would have liked to have seen in areas outside of English. However, it was definitely a good try. So aside from those summer supports, what is really more important is the ongoing support that we're providing to students, and primarily that's done through that built-in time during the school day, which is Success or Advocate, depending on which school you're at. And that's really where we target in who needs what and where are they going to get that. It's a very prescriptive sort of design, so that it's not just, hey, come on by if you would like to, but you need to get remediation in algebra, and so you need to be in this room with this teacher on these days in order to receive that. And there's really a high level of accountability for our students to participate, because we definitely want them to pass those exams. They're very, very high stakes at the high school level with that link to graduation. And so we do have retest opportunities coming up in December. And so really and truly, this EOC accelerated instruction is ongoing. In addition, we have our before and after school tutorials, as well as other non-face-to-face opportunities for those students who really are maybe working or have other obligations outside of school that they're not able to come. So our online Success 24/7 platform, as well as some other additional EOC prep materials, are online for those students at their convenience. So let's look at results. Here we have Algebra 1, and so during that spring administration, we're looking at all of the different Algebra 1 tests. So that's going to be just the regular STAR, the STAR linguistically accommodated version, as well as the accommodated version for certain students with disabilities. So there were 928 total first-time testers, and of those students, 93% passed on the first go. You can see that's relative to that state rate of 82%. So out of those 64 students that did not pass that spring administration, we had 45 students participate in the retest. 6 of those students did meet the standard, which is lower than the state rate, but if you'll recall, the cumulative effect with the initial wave of passers is very high in terms of our overall student success on that exam, although we'll continue providing remediation and those students will take it again in December. So looking at biology, you can see here again, out of the total first-time testers, we had a 94% pass rate. So of those 57 students that did not pass, 35 retook. And in this case, we had 43% meet the standard, which we're glad for. That means fewer students that we're going to continue remediation and taking those exams again. The further away you get from taking that actual course and taking the exam, the harder it can be to pass the EOC. Looking at English 1, we see a similar trend in overall success. I will note the significant gap between the state rate of 68% passing on the first try versus our 82 in the first spring administration, and we actually had 126 students retake in the summer. Then English 2. Similarly, we saw an 83% pass rate compared to the state rate of 72, and then 100 retesters during the summer administration. And then finally, U.S. history, we had a 94% pass rate on the first try in the spring, and then we had 25 retesters in the summer, which was a pass rate of 44%. So as I mentioned earlier, some mixed results in terms of our overall performance, but we're continuing to push those students forward. As we talked about last year, student participation is definitely something that we're continuing to work on. The folks that participated in the summer remediation program are already having discussions about, what worked, what didn't work, and what might we do differently during this next go-round. We're going to have an even tighter turnaround time between receiving the results and the summer administration this time, so it may be an opportunity for us to get even more creative with how we do that. But really those in-school supports and those ongoing supports and really having that preventative approach of trying to ensure that the maximum number of students are successful on their first try is truly our philosophy. But we will continue providing that targeted instruction as well as those other kinds of skills such as test-taking strategies and anxiety reduction for students who do need that. So we really think we have some good options online, but certainly want to consider how we might be able to continue to reach more students through those flexible options as well. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you might have or receive any comments.
Thank you for the summary. Any questions or comments?
I have one question, and it's something from, I guess, a while back in the presentation. You mentioned that there wasn't necessarily a good alignment of students who needed credit recovery and remediation for end of course. I find that interesting. Have you identified why or what it is?
So if you'll recall, several months ago when we really delved more deeply into our results and we really looked at what it takes for a student to pass those various exams, you might remember that certain exams require a much higher percentage of questions answered correctly than others. And so what we see, especially with those exams that require fewer correct questions in order to meet the passing standard, that we're going to see higher passing standards on the exam. We see pretty good passing rates in terms of credit. It's that English 1 and 2 where our students tend to really struggle. The passing rate is much higher. The writing is extremely rigorous, and that's a huge component of what a student has to do in order to be successful in that particular exam. And so we do see some disconnect between being able to make it through the course and then pass that end of course exam. So it's not necessarily a good indicator that the student has mastered the content, just like we were talking about earlier this evening.
Anything else? All right, thank you. Well, I didn't get anything I didn't get a card from anybody. Okay, so we'll adjourn that part of the meeting.